Speaking freedom, giving you the answers to be free. Be free.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's performance is about to begin.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Speaking Freedom TV's Journey to Freedom. Of course, I am your host, Dr. Kaci, and today's guest is Miss Phyllis. Hey, Miss Phyllis, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me here today with you.
I'm so glad to have you. Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, basically, I've been a psychotherapist for over 30 years. And as a result of also doing a lot of my own work, personal work, and being a psychotherapist with so many people, families, children, couples, individuals, children, like I said, I have really started to draw some conclusions between the mental health of the individual family and the mental health of our country. And so I'm writing a book called America in Therapy, in which I'm really trying to make that understanding available to everyone, to the layman. One of the ideas of my book is to sort of take everything that I've learned in the office, whether I've been the client or the therapist, and really bring it to the world in an understandable way that you don't have to be a psychotherapist to understand this. You don't have to have gone to graduate school. You don't have to do anything. I really present what I'm saying in terms of looking at what's happening in our culture and in our politics and in all of our different communities on a national level through the lens of our mental health, because I really feel like that's the big one untapped area that we need to focus on for everyone's well-being and really for ultimately for our survival. So my book is really like looking at the microcosm of the individual and the family, and looking at the macrocosm of our larger institutions, people in power and government, not through the lens of blame or targeting who's right or wrong, but for the purpose of actually bringing the tools of healing that we know in the world of psychotherapy to the world at large. And my overall hope, and I know that I'm not going to accomplish this by myself, and that there are lots of people working from many different angles on the same thing that I'm working on, but to be my one voice in saying, this is how I see the problem of mental ill health in our country. And by that, I don't mean like this most severe end of mental illness where people are just really highly non-functional. I'm talking about suffering and pain and unhealed trauma and the ripple effects of that throughout all levels of our society. My ultimate hope is that we come together with a different agenda for our country, that we focus on the well-being of all of our family members, the way we hope that in an individual family, the people in charge of the family, the caregivers, are able and can and have the resources to focus on the welfare of their entire family, because that's what contributes to the best mental health that we can achieve as individuals. And so why not apply those principles to our country?
It's so funny that you say that, because as a veteran with PTSD and having survived my own bounds of trauma and, just life, because life is filled with trauma. One of the reasons why I started studying psychology was kind of to heal myself, but also because I was so intrigued about learning how psychology works. And the first class sold me. Because the intro to it is like, man, if you've been through anything, and if you have the mind of wonder and finding peace, then as soon as you start hearing information about how things make you who you are, it's like, wait a minute, this is really good. And my one of my books, my largest book of audio books, is about spiritual human behavior. And the goal of this book is to kind of help people see their purpose through healing, because a lot of times it's so much of I want to say the attacks that we get, the things that we endure, it kind of shows us who we are if we're not looking at it through what the incident is. but it also offers so much healing. But what I learned is that, because I started thinking about, okay, like, why do I date the guys that I date? Why am I doing this? And why is that? And
Yeah,
that why is so healing, because now it's like, okay, I get it. Now I understand how my environment played into that, how the people that were around me played into that, and why I am who I am just based on the environmental factor. So it's great to have you on and to be able to talk about mental health and how the larger aspect of because I often say that when you talk about racism and as one level of mental health,
absolutely.
white Americans have just as much trauma as Black Americans.
Right.
It's different sides of the trauma, but the
Mhm.
trauma is still present, and that's why you have so much of the bicker, the fear, the and
That's right.
a lot of everything that we see is fear based,
Right.
but it's from trauma on both sides, and a lot of people don't account that the people that are not nice are traumatized just as much as the people
A
that
hundred
are
percent.
that.
No, I love that you know that and that you're talking about that because I don't think everybody knows that.
Mm-hmm,
I think we really separate people into good and bad people.
mm-hmm,
Realize that the people who inflict the worst pain on others are coming from something very unhealthy and often highly abusive and traumatic.
mm-hmm,
Our goal, and this is why I love the lens that psychology brings to our human condition, the goal is healing. The goal is not blame. The goal is not retribution. The goal is not punishment. The goal is not shame. The goal is to heal and to interrupt this cycle that is spinning so fast out of control in our country. At least that's the way it appears to me. And so,
and heal,
yeah,
because healing makes you one, healing helps you to see the trauma in others versus seeing the attack or the blaming. Like, no, because when you start understanding, wait a minute, I got some trauma, I it's some stuff that I, no wonder I'm like this, then you start looking at others like, wait a minute, it's something else deeper there. That's why that's going on. And definitely on a large national and even international level, there's a lot of things that just the world needs to heal from.
yes. And if you even think about our country and the history of America, so many of the people that populated America, not counting the Native Americans, came from trauma. They were
Mm-hmm,
persecution or poverty
mm-hmm,
or discrimination or war in other countries. And none of those people healed. But there
mm-hmm.
wasn't even psychology happening back then, you
And
know.
then when it was happening, it was as like you got to go to a psychology, like a mental health hospital. You're gonna be locked up. It
Right,
wasn't a functional way that people could heal, and then people were scared to even say anything about mental health. That's why it's a stigma, because people
right.
went to like a prison, like
Yeah.
psychiatric hospitals were like prisons.
Yeah. Yeah. And definitely people were seen as other rather than they're the symptom bearers of the ills of the cultures and the societies and the larger families that they have been a product of. And these are all parts of the kind of things that I want to share for everyone in my book. And again, like these things, and I think some people do, but I think a lot of people don't. I think a lot of people really still, as I said, separate us into good and bad, right and wrong, sinners and believers, and whatever kind of distinctions make some people other and therefore either not worthy or worthy of blame and attack. And that's the big cycle that I think we need to interrupt, because the larger ramifications of that are assault on huge populations and war and assault on our earth.
Mhm.
Um,
But
so
then I think that even with the self attacks, because we do a lot of, I mean, not we don't, everybody don't have to cut yourself in order to self harm. It's a lot of self harm and talk, a lot of treating ourselves bad, subjecting ourselves to things that we know are bad because we don't feel worthy, or you feel like you deserve it. So there is a lot of room to talk about psychology
yeah,
and just healing, because a lot of things, like mental health isn't the worst thing. Like, people act like mental health is like, oh my god, you got a mental health. Like, no, everybody
right,
suffers with
Right.
It's not like a illness. It's just adapting to life. And there are so many band-aids that exist, like church or shopping or work. It's so many things that allow us to kind of patch it up and cover it up, but never really work on it, to where
Right.
people spend a lot of their times avoiding.
Right. And also, I think, I think you're alluding to this, that the word mental health still has a big stigma in our country. And I'm sure you see this in the work that you do. And I know that of all the years that I've been a psychotherapist, that people are really suffering in this country, even people who look from the outside like they have it together.
Probably the most.
Yeah, because they feel like they have to look like they have it together.
Mm-hmm.
When there's unresolved sexual abuse in their childhood, or physical violence, or someone died and no one ever helped process the grief, or there was addiction in their family, or they were abandoned, or they were bullied on the school ground, or they just had depressed parents who weren't available. And the level of emotional suffering that people contend with and feel, for the most part, like they have to get over on their own and still look good and be successful in the world, is very tragic, because we need each other. We need to be able to talk about these things in a safe place, and even to talk about the things that we've done that maybe weren't so nice, in a safe place where the goal is healing. And that's what I think, one of the big things that I think the world of psychology has to offer our country. What if, and I say this all the time, what if, when we talk about, one party disagrees with the other party about how to handle the economics or immigration or abortion, or whatever, the millions of issues that people argue over and are so determined that they're right, and everybody thinks they're right. What if the commitment was, yes, we disagree. We have big divides in our beliefs and in our values and in what we want to see, or what we believe will make us successful, or whatever. But what if the commitment was the same commitment that we bring to a session, which is, we're going to sit down and listen to each other. And we're going to really try to hear the other person's point of view. And we're going to try to offer each other the kind of deep listening that we all want for ourselves. And so I see psychology and the tools of good psychotherapy as nonpartisan. They're not about who's right and who's wrong, or which party has the right answer. It's about our communication and our valuing of each other, and our willingness and our commitment to come together and actually come to some agreement for the good of everyone, which is what we expect to happen in a family, right?
Right. Or at least that's the goal.
That's the goal. Yeah. Imperfect as we are. Imperfect as we are. And one of the things that I say, and again, I think these are the hardest things for human beings to do. I think it's much easier to fight and to be divided and to react and to try to dominate someone who you want to see things your way or do things your way. That's sort of our nature, right? Or that's
what we've been conditioned to think and believe, definitely.
Right. And that definitely. And I think that whole paradigm is what is needing to collapse, and that we need to see ourselves as a family. And I call it the family of America, that we need to see ourselves as a family. And what are the things that we want from a family? What are the things we expect from a healthy family? It's cooperation and love and support for one another, and
understanding. And but I think understanding is what allows for the lessons to form, and the lessons, learning from what you've gone through, definitely help with the healing, because it changes the trauma to not maybe a more pleasant experience, but it shifts the perspective of the trauma that you've gone through, because now, instead of feeling for the hurt, you're like feeling after the hurt. A lot of people, when they revisit a traumatic event, it's like, I'm like searching for the hurt in there. But if you change the perspective and you see what you've learned from it, okay, what did you get from that? What did it teach you about you? What did it teach you about people? And what did it teach you about interactions? And if it's a bad thing, not how to avoid it, but how to protect yourself when moving forward. So what things to look for? What things, okay, what was the red flags that you missed before? Like all of those things. And even when it comes to healing America,
Yeah,
I am one that always pushes for. I believe that there should be grants, like major grants for people to learn psychology and to get into the field of psychology because the police force needs it. The police officers need psychologists that's on the payroll. I think that in the entertainment industry, they need life coaches and psychologists out there as well because you got a lot of people that's dealing with a lot of stuff that goes into different careers with whatever trauma, and they're taking their trauma, their drama, and everything else with them, and then they
absolutely.
have no way to release.
And then if you're in a position of power and you haven't healed that, you're more set up to act that power out in a negative way on the people that you have power over. And I think that's a lot of what we're looking at in America today, given that there are wonderful people doing fantastic things all
Right.
over the country. But often people who have really unresolved big power issues end up in positions of power, because that's what they're drawn to. And people who have been suppressed and forced to submit often stay in that role
Mhm.
of lying.
So, but I oftentimes think that sometimes people can have the best of intentions and have all of these good things that's going for them, and they get into power, and it's either the having the power for the first time or the pressure of the power, because with power comes burden and responsibility.
Right.
One, you got people that's all trying to glean to the power. There's like your power source. So people come to the source. And then you got the users. Then when you're in entertainment and all of these narratives, any type of power, because even in politics, now you got the women that want to sleep with you, whether you're a man or a woman. You got the men everybody is like they're seeking it.
Yeah. No, I think that's really true. And I think there's a lot to be said about that. And the two things that come to my mind that I think are really important, one is that I don't think we're actually programmed as human beings to deal with that much power over other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just too easy for it to become an ego trip and to become a power trip and addictive. Like you can't get enough, just like it's a fix, like of how much power and control and say you have over what happens. And, because even in our own lives, we like to have power and control over what happens, right?
Right.
How many people are arguing with their spouse about how to cook the fish,
Right.
right? So you magnify that by being a leader of a state or a country or a huge organization or a business, and it kind of tends to go to people's heads.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're just not, I don't think we're really wired to handle that much power. And that speaks to the other piece that I think psychotherapy and psychology really have a lot to say about. And that is that in that setting, we treat people as equals. We teach couples how to share power. We teach couples and families how to communicate so that no one is just dominated and forced to submit, but that everybody's heard. And certainly children are not going to have the same power as their parents, but that doesn't mean they don't have a voice and they're not respected and their needs aren't factored into the equation.
Definitely.
And shared power means we're actually looking at the good of the family, not just the good of any one individual. And that's, I think, the big paradigm shift, or one of them, that we need to incorporate as a country, because right now we're not really looking at the good of everybody at all.
No,
And
a lot of people are, like I said, there is drawn to power and then drawn to negativity. And I don't know what about negativity that's so alluring, that's so like it's like sucks you in and just it keeps you there. It mentally is like that.
what are you thinking of in particular when you talk about the negativity?
Just negative energy in general, but specifically when you said that, I think about how negative people are online. How, I mean, even the news is like a lot more negative. Like I don't even watch the news because it's more bad news than good. You leave watching the news and you be depressed because like, well, did anything good happen?
And a
We had
lot of
nothing
things
good to
good
report.
did happen. A lot of good did happen, but it's not on the news.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I realize is that so I have done some history searching to try to understand my family's background or whatever. And in doing that, a lot of the things that I was looking through, or that you often have to look through, is the newspaper. And the newspaper back in the day, it was like parties, and they was just announcing all type of things that had nothing to do with the worst things in the world. I mean, the bad stuff was there, but it definitely was a lot smaller than the good things that exist.
Yeah. I mean, really do think some of it can be looked at through the lens of addiction.
Mm-hmm.
That we have the possibility of so much greater wealth. That doesn't eliminate that many people are living in poverty, but many of those people are living in poverty because someone's making a lot of money off their back.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an addiction to wealth, there's an addiction to fame, there's an addiction to power, there's an addiction to sex, there's an addiction to acquisition and the greatest technology and the fastest car. And
Is it the attention?
Yeah. The addiction to attention.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it seems like behind all of those things come attention. It comes with that.
Yeah, and so I think our young people are absorbing some of that. Like, how do you look good in this society? How do you stand out? Rather than what's actually really fulfilling. What's fulfilling is, I think, like, when people actually do some work on themselves, what they find, and some people are fortunate just to know this themselves, but I think generally when you do some work and you peel back the layers of the things that hurt you or the conditioning that made you feel like you had to be somebody that you're not, when you peel all that back and you get to the hurt places or you get to the early messages, we each have something that we were born to contribute. Mm-hmm. And it might be what we call small scale, or it might be large scale. It might be that you were just born to be the most awesome mother, or father, or you just had a skill with machinery and you can fix anything. Or you're somebody who wants to, purify water all over the earth, or,
and that's a gift too. And that's a gift. And people sometimes don't look at that as like a gift from God or something, but that's just as much of a gift as somebody who's super spiritual.
Right. Totally. And we each have something. And I think if we had an education system that was focused on how do we nurture the core of each child? How do we open the space for them to say, I love to paint. No, I want to be a runner. No, I want to be a doctor.
And change their mind throughout the course of growing up.
Absolutely. And have it really because I think we really have that in us. And I think a lot of people suffer partly because it was never encouraged or it was made fun of, or they never had the opportunity to actually even pursue what they wanted to do because they had to, pay the rent.
Or like the parents, because I always talk about when dealing in relationships, people go from high school, like from being up under their parent to trying to be in love as soon as they get to being an adult. You never have real time to develop individually, to understand your own personality, because for your whole life, you're stuck trying to conform to what somebody else likes or what somebody else wants or what somebody else needs. And then a lot of times, and even the other day, somebody was like, well, why do people wait until they're 30 to kind of come to? And because all of the rest of the time, they've been trying to cater to what everybody else wants. And then sometimes around 30, 35, they come to that aha moment, like, well, wait a minute, something's got to give.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a part of that also that goes along with what you're saying is that we tend to repeat what we know. So if you were in a relatively healthy home where you were loved and you were taken care of and no one beat you, and your parents more or less did their best to resolve their own issues without huge conflicts or screaming or fighting or throwing things or hitting, then you walk out of your family more or less conditioned to look for that in relationship. But if you've grown up with, heavy duty addiction and, fighting and conflict and abuse and neglect, the chances are you're either going to reenact that with your
totally
partner, or you're going to be the person who is acted on. And that's the tide that I see kind of growing in our country, that people either identify with the aggressor or they become passive. And both of them, as you said earlier, which I agree and have written a lot about in my book, both of those are products of abuse, and both of those people are hurting. And we have to know this to interrupt the cycle. And I really think one of our biggest agendas in this country and where we should be putting our money is to helping families.
Yeah,
On
I
all
definitely
levels,
agree.
economically, socially, educationally, with housing, teaching psychology in the schools, making it safe to say if there's a problem without thinking you're going to just end up in jail right away, but that the family deserves intervention if there's substance abuse or if there's violence. Let's see if we can help people before we lock them up.
Yeah, I definitely my push personally is for there to be psychology in school starting about 7th grade. Now, my children kind of learn a little bit of it, but I definitely think that this should be like a standard to learn psychology, because that is the foundation of who you are and understanding yourself as a person so you can begin to work through those issues. But also, I also push for there to be a more community-based policing where you kind of shift the policing. One, I think there's room for us to shift policing to escort school buses on field trips. There's a lot of field trips that would keep police busy. Also, give them more community-based efforts, even if there was like guarded schools in a sense, but with some type of perimeter, of course, because that could go wrong as well. But I think that if you allow police officers to be trained in psychology, one, it would help them, because if they can help themselves, then they will see other people from a different lens. Because if a police officer got bullied or wasn't good enough or felt like he got to walk around with because sometimes police officers go in good, they haven't had no issues. But when you get on the police force, you are mentally manipulated to think the worst of the thoughts that could happen. In the military, when they train you to go to war, they tell you everybody might kill you. So when you get to war, you shouldn't. You're like, wait a minute, I'm about to shoot somebody. I don't know who I'm gonna shoot, but I'm ready to shoot. And it's because of the way that they train you that kind of set you up to be like triggered.
Exactly. Exactly. So, I mean, the whole point of what you're saying and what I'm saying from many, many different angles is we have to retrain ourselves about what actually creates mental health and well-being, which creates peace.
Hi, I'm Dr. Kaci, not your typical clinical doctor. I am an ordained minister, but not your typical minister. I am also a certified life coach, love coach, sex coach, solution focused coach, transformation coach, and more. I have a whole lot of information that I would like to help you grow with. And I hope that soon I can help you be the best you that you can be. Confidence, spirituality, and purpose. That's wholeness, complete.
Peace and safety and love and connection. And the gap is that peace and safety and love and connection aren't even debate topics in politics. It's not even part of the conversation. So we have a long way to go. And, you know, you and so many people and me with my book and so many other people doing wonderful things out there are just trying to add our piece to that voice, because that's what our children need. That's what they're going to need to survive in this world. That's what the world needs to make it, you know.
I think that it's going to have to take a lot of system breaking down. And I hate to say this because it just sounds bad. But I think that we can restructure America without America having to change the way the structure is. Like the government is necessary, police are necessary, so a lot of aspects are necessary, but it's just shifting the perspective of their internal function and how they deal with people externally.
Right. Which is, and how the umbrella that I would put over the whole thing is the same umbrella that I put over psychology, which is the goal is to repair our human relations.
Yes. That's
the goal. So what can we do? And there was a beautiful story. I don't remember if I saw it on a news clip or where I saw it, but it was some guy, some man, a father, was robbing a convenience store, and they called the police and he was captured. The police came to the store and got him, right? And the policeman asked him, what was going on? Instead of just putting him in handcuffs and dragging him away. And the guy could not feed his family. He could not feed his family, and he was stealing food. And the policeman did not arrest him. He hooked him up with resources.
And that's what's needed.
That's the kind of America I want to see,
Right.
And
Because
that
normally people that go into crime, they're not just bored. Now, some people are bored. There's about 5% of people that go into crime are just bored and they ain't got nothing to do. They need something that really that helps them understand their purpose so that they don't have to do frivolous things. But 95% of people that are in crime are trying to provide for their family.
And a huge percentage, and I've read different statistics in different places, but a huge percentage have suffered abuse that's untreated. And a huge percentage of the prison population are untreated survivors of child abuse.
And they're still being untreated in the prison system and still being triggered and trauma because it's so many things that go on inside the prison system that is traumatic and that is discouraging. So definitely there should be some psychologists and life coaches. I mean, life coaches are like, they can't diagnose, but they offer the same type of support I was just thinking about this on the way to pick my children up for school, because I think that life coaches can be just as important as psychologists and psychiatrists, because they all play in a part to help you fine tune the thoughts of your mind. So can I ask you, how did you get into this work?
It really came out of my own struggles with my own childhood, that there was trauma in my childhood that I didn't understand. And nobody went, I'm 75. So people weren't talking about psychology. They weren't talking about trauma. They weren't talking about child abuse. They weren't talking about any of that. It was just all like who you're supposed to be when you grow up and the college you're supposed to go to or the degree you're supposed to get and how much money you're supposed to make. And that's the world I grew up in. And so I was kind of a mystery to myself until I was a lot older and I repeated what I knew. And, my pattern was to be more the passive one and let someone else dominate me. And in my first time around, I got into a marriage that was like that. And I struggled with it, but I didn't struggle with it effectively. I didn't know how to have appropriate power. And really the appropriate power was to leave.
Right.
Which I eventually did. And part of my leaving was that I finally went to therapy myself. And again, this is old news now, but it was really new news when I went, and that was in the early 80s. And I went to the library and I got a book out on psychology. And the first thing I read was a list of the main things that happen to people in childhood that affect them for the rest of their lives. And up until then, I would have told you, my family's not the problem, it's me. There's something wrong with me. And so that was like the huge first light bulb. Oh, something happened, things happened that created my feelings, my reaction patterns, my attractions, and my blockage. And so I did a lot of therapy, a lot. And at the same time, I went to graduate school and I got a degree. So I was kind of doing both at once. And I worked in a sexual abuse treatment program for a number of years. And that was incredible experience for me. I really got the whole family dynamic of abuse in a way that I don't know that I would have gotten. I certainly wouldn't have gotten that just from graduate school. I mean, I think graduate school for me, and as good as it was, and I'm glad I went, it was sort of first grade. and then what you really learn on the job, and
the experience is really what's going to teach you, because you're going to hit the book can only tell you so much, and it's only going to go through so many ways to handle different scenarios, but being on the ground is definitely a lot different.
Definitely a lot different. So between being on the ground and doing a lot of my own personal work, I went into so many dark places in myself for a long time, that the gift was, and this goes back to something you said in the beginning that I really didn't want to forget, and that is that our greatest pain can be the source of our greatest gifts, because people's stories did not scare me. I wasn't afraid to go into dark places with people because I had been there and I knew what it was like and I knew we could come out the other side. And I felt like, it was genuine for me to say, there's light at the end of this tunnel. And, no one had actually said that for me. And I realized what a gift that was, just for someone to say, there is light at the end of the tunnel. Who you are is not what happened to you. There is an essential person in there that has always been innocent and good and loving and kind. And we just have to unlock them, Um, and so, I just so believe that we can just be such a profound, loving, healing influence on each other. And we don't have to be therapists to do it.
Right.
It can just
But
be.
that information comes so much more received when it's coming from somebody with experience themselves, because they can relate differently than somebody who has just gone and read the book and now they didn't study psychology because they think it'll be cool.
Right.
Somebody that's actually experienced and overcame telling you that you can overcome is
Yeah.
a really blessing. It's like, man, for real, you went through that and you still made it here. Well, I know I can do it.
That's right. And I think it's interesting because absolutely I agree with you. And if you look at some of the books or movies or stories of that we love the most, it's that kind of story. It's somebody who made it through to the other side of some huge tragedy or trauma or loss or grief. And we love that. And I think human beings long for that. And we can all give that. We can all tell our story to each other. And yes, there is a process of going down and reprocessing the trauma itself that is more of a professional issue. But even in a world where if you walked into a store and the person in charge of the store or waiting on you like greeted you with like, hi, how are you today? It's so good to see you. Or they greeted you with,
hey, yeah.
hey, or they walk in the other direction and they don't even, those things also make a huge difference in our lives.
And I definitely want to reiterate there is an importance of getting a professional. And it's of course it's good to talk to your friends and all of that, but you
Yeah.
need somebody, one, that has an unbiased opinion. They're not going to take your side. They're not going
Right.
to take the other person's side. They're going to really listen. Now, listen, if you ever listen to me and my content, you know that there is Dr. Kaci and then there is Kaci. And Kaci is going to give you what I feel, but
Right.
Dr. Kaci is going to listen to you and give you what you
Right.
need to hear and
Right.
give you perspectives and give you different angles to see it so that you can not only make a good decision, but the best decision with the information that's available.
I love that distinction. That's really, yeah, I think that's really, really true. And I think,
Because you want to be a friend. Like when I am not working, I don't want to talk about work stuff. So this is Kaci information. But when I am in need to be in work mode, then yeah, I'm going to give you the best work-based answer. But I definitely like to be, just in regular friend mode. I don't want to talk about therapy or, what's going on. Like, no
right.
complaining today. We had to complain another day. You got to set boundaries.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, we're definitely, as a country, I would just love to see mental health. And I really mean that as mental well-being. I don't mean, healing from schizophrenia, which, God bless someone who's a schizophrenic. But I'm talking about being loving, being kind, being cooperative. And the big one that I like to really stress is being committed to nonviolent conflict resolution.
And that is a definite need because we've come to a time where violence is easier, especially extreme violence. And most of that is because with women, they've been told it's okay to be emotionally erratic, to just feel however and act out however. You can have a tantrum because you're a girl and girls do that. And then with men, they've been taught to suppress their emotions so much to where when it does come out, it's like a jack in the box. It didn't waited so long. It's been in there brewing and just more stuff adding on, and then it comes out as an outburst. But the truth is we need to teach people not just emotional intelligence, because it's not just knowing the information, but how to use and process, because you can know a lot of stuff, but if you don't know how to apply it, then knowing it means nothing.
Right. And I think that's part of what good psychotherapy and psychology does. It really teaches people great communication skills and how to tolerate their own distress and to get to the heart of their worst reactive patterns and try to heal them. Because really, on one level, part of the healing for our country is healing ourselves.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Between healing ourselves and then really kind of flipping back some layers on some of the issues, because a lot of issues in America are like, I don't want to say totally swept up under the rug, but they are like, oh, we can't talk about that. That don't exist, or we shouldn't discuss that. But the only way that we can truly heal is to really address the things that are going on. So some
Right.
of the bad things that I see have gone on in the last 4 or 5 years, I don't necessarily think is bad, because things have to be exposed
That's
in order
right.
to be healed. So unless we expose what's going on, whether it's in the White House, whether it's not in the White House, just everyday life, until we really expose it, you can't really heal. And so it's uncomfortable. And it is not always easy, but you have to begin to be able to sit with yourself. And I know that's hard for some people. We've seen
Absolutely.
through the pandemic how hard that is for people to just be able to have
Yeah.
peace with themselves.
Yeah. And I see I've been talking about this a lot because it's really come up a lot, this whole thing about exposing the dark side of what's been hidden. And I see it as a very good thing. I see that the quest for truth is really a strong impulse in people and in America. I think we really want to know what's really going on. And the lens that I'm hoping we can do that through is, let's look at that so we can repair it, not let's look at it so we can figure out who to hate.
Right. And that definitely is important, because blaming doesn't help. You really have to, one, take accountability for each part of whatever's going on.
Yeah.
I want to say assign responsibility, but it's not even about what happened to put you in whatever situation, but the responsibility of healing, the
Right.
responsibility of addressing the uncomfortableness. Because a
Right.
lot of times what we do is we feel uncomfortable and we fight or flight, versus feeling uncomfortable and trying to figure out, okay, well, why do I feel this uncomfortableness? Because it can unlock the key to anger, resentment, and bitterness, and all these other things that fester. And people have to really understand that um, stress begins to cause ailments in the body. So your mental health not being right will cause other areas of your body to not be right. And then that's how people get autoimmune disorders, where your body is attacking itself because you're not dealing with and healing from and releasing any of
Yeah.
the things that you've gone through. So now it's festering. It's like, it's like it start eating at your insides almost.
Yeah. And I think that's totally true. And we kind of know now, it's not always appreciated, but we know there's a mind-body connection. We
Mm-hmm.
know that. I mean, I think science has shown that. But it's not always appreciated or factored into the equation. And the other thing I wanted to say was, you brought up the word responsibility, and I think that's a really important word. I think what I see with people, if they really allow themselves to go into a healing process and they peel back the layers of whatever happened to them that was injurious and whatever they might have done that wasn't so kind to other people, and they peel it all back and they have some connection to their more essential self, they innately want to take responsibility for their actions.
Yeah.
It's like healing produces somebody who is a different person, who behaves differently in the world. And so that's one of the key reasons why this is so critical, because as we heal ourselves, we do make different choices and we make better ones. I have never seen anyone ever in all the years of being a therapist who really did that kind of work of healing the traumas of their life, who became a more bitter, hateful person. I've never seen it. I've seen people love themselves more, make better choices in relationships, treat their children and their families and their employees better. Not perfectly, because we're not
I mean,
perfect,
right.
right? But
Now, and
better.
I do want to preface and say that a lot of times we think that we are imperfect, but our imperfections as individuals is what makes us individuals. If
That's
everybody was perfect and everybody was the same, you would not be you. You would be just like the other person. And the goal is for us all to be able to be used in our own differences to bring
exactly.
about world peace, love, and life, really.
No, I 100% agree with you. I 100% agree with you. And the truth is, there is no perfection. There isn't. We're working to transform the pain or the injury or the places where we've gone astray. We're working to heal that. That's like spinning straw into gold.
Right. So what does a healed world look like to you?
A healed world looks to me like they're actually that we disarm. That's a big one. No person in their individual family heals with a gun held to their head.
Right.
So I don't know how we expect that we are going to heal as a global community of human beings with nuclear weapons held to our heads or chemical additives poisoning our earth. So I think a big one is a disarmed earth. I think a healed earth looks like there is really deep and profound healing between the masculine and the feminine, and that we really know not only our equality, but the true value that we each hold for one another. And that we revere that we honor that we esteem that, and that we treasure that, the beautiful coming together of the masculine and feminine, rather than what we have now, which is so much domination and submission. And that's not everybody, but that's a lot
The
that's still.
large majority. So what has been the hardest thing in your career path and coming into this from your own trauma?
I think the hardest thing for me was remembering what happened to me. It was a really hard journey. It was very dark. It was very scary. And I had enough help. And I was fortunate to have help, because I don't know that I could have done it on my own. And I think most of us can't. So I had enough help, and I had some really good help to support me through that. And I would say that was the hardest part. Being a therapist, certainly there's challenges in being a therapist. There's challenges in working with other people. There's challenges in being married. There's challenges in having children. There's challenges in making money. But none of those things were as hard for me as actually remembering the trauma that I had gone through. And I think that's why people tend to bury it, because it's painful, and we have to know that there's someone there holding the light for us at the end of that tunnel.
Yeah. So if there was anything about your life that you could change, would you change anything?
No, I mean, probably not. I mean, I feel like I've been so blessed. I've been so blessed. My children have all come out of it, and, they're magnificent human beings, and I have beautiful grandchildren, and I have a wonderful second marriage. I think the thing that I think I will always have some regret about, just because I am human and I'm a mother, is that I wish I had been a little bit more emotionally intact when I was raising my children, because I think that was hard. I think that was hard for them. I think they always knew that they were loved by me, and I think that's abiding. But I'd love to roll back and be a different mom, but I am who I am now.
I hope your children are able to listen to this because as a child of a mother, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
Me and my mother have had our struggles. And the thing that I've wished and still hope for today is that she would be able to come to terms with the treatment that I received versus the treatment that she projects to have given, because there is it's it's a little weird because my mother is a really nice person. She really is, especially to other people. I just have never got to experience the niceness like that other people experience.
Yeah.
But if she would say those things that were, even to try to talk about it, because normally when I try to ask my mother about anything, she's like, don't psychoanalyze me. And I'm thinking, like, listen, if you really knew, I'm really being selfish right now. I'm trying to work on me, and it just involves you. Like, if it wasn't for that, I probably would ask. But that if she would come to terms with the reality of my end of what the experience was, I think that it would be helpful. So I definitely think if you hadn't spoken to your children and said those words, it would definitely be a blessing for them to hear and know and understand.
Yeah. And my children are, they're all very psychologically attuned, and we have had huge, and it's not like I didn't hit them, beat them or
Right,
anything.
right, right.
It's more like I just wasn't a powerful mom, and I wasn't as protective as I wish I could have been. And I mean, those are the main things that I feel. And, lots of things, lots of mistakes I
Right,
made.
right, right. I mean, and that's,
But
listen, as a parent now, on the other side of this, as a parent, there are a lot of things that you will learn kind of in the curve of parenting. And it also depends on the type of parent you have. Because of course you're either going to reiterate the things that you learned or start implementing the things that you wish would have happened.
right.
And we're now, I think we're just now getting into a society where you can form your own parental thoughts and not feel guilty about not doing it the way that other people do.
Right, right. Yeah. And so, my children and I've had lots and lots of conversations, and and I think the air's pretty cleared. I just think as a mom, you just always want to have done it better.
Right,
Like, that's
right,
all,
right,
you
right.
know.
And I appreciate that because my children are just 13 and 14, so I got a lot of years to go.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
this is just the good part. This is just now getting to the juicy section of life because it's now where I'm starting to see the things that I've taught implemented and see it come to life and see how they adjust to being many adults in this world. I mean, soon they'll be going into, my son is about to go into high school and then it'll be college. So it is, for me, it's like refreshing to watch them grow into their own people, like their own
Yeah, yeah.
individual person.
Well, they have you who's already done a crap load of work, right? So,
Right.
like,
That's
so
always
they're
true.
lucky. They're very fortunate, and I think that's wonderful.
What advice would you give the listeners before we get out of here?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of big things. Just if you really are suffering, find someone to get help with, because you don't deserve to suffer alone. And there are people out there who want to help. So, and then the other big thing I would say is, if you have a calling, if there's something in your heart that you really want to do, follow it. Just be true to yourself. Like, you don't have to do what you think is expected of you. I mean, you know what I'm saying, within the parameters of being a responsible human
We
being.
had a foolish. That was her foolish proofing that, you guys. Listen to her, but also don't, keep it in perspective.
Yeah, because I think that we do have our essential being has some place it really wants to go in life. And I think the biggest gift we can give to ourselves is to follow that guidance from within, and to support one another to do that.
Yes, I definitely agree. So please tell viewers where they can find you at.
Yeah, I have a website. It's www.phyllisleavitt.com, and please sign in with your email and get on my newsletter list, and I'll let you know as soon as my book America in Therapy comes out. And I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram and Twitter, and I just made a TikTok account. I haven't gone on there, and YouTube. So I've got lots of blogs and videos on my website, and we'll try to keep that updated as well.
Do you have more books than the one that you're working on now? Do you have previous books?
I have two previous books. One is called A Light in the Darkness, and the other one's called Into the Fire. And those are two books I wrote, not too long ago, several years ago. And those are more somewhat autobiographical and more about the spiritual side of my journey. And my next book, which I'm hoping to write a book that brings psychology and the world of consciousness and spirit together.
Yeah.
That's my goal for my next book.
That sounds great, especially as an author that kind of, my goal is to kind of branch the understanding of both of those two things together. Well,
Great.
Miss Phyllis, it has been such a pleasure. I actually have another show idea for you. So once we get off of here, I am going to send you some information so that you could be on this other podcast that I am on, because we definitely could use talking about mental health and how to grow America really and truly. So
Thank
I
you. Thank you.
Appreciate you, give you your flowers because you have been such an amazing guest with so much knowledge and understanding about life and psychology and really telling the world what we need.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And you're a delightful person to have this wonderful conversation with.
Thank you. Until next time, everybody, this has been a journey to freedom.
Hi, I'm Kaci, Dr. Kaci. Welcome to Speaking Freedom. We are happy to have you, and we hope that we are able to help you in every way possible. Have a good evening. If you've enjoyed this video, like, share, subscribe, and turn on your notifications. New episode every Friday.